Okay. Well, thank you both for coming. Minjung couldn't be here today, so it's just going to be me. But if you do have any questions, you can also direct them to Minjung as well. I'm going to talk a little bit today about designing globally connected classrooms. And within this kind of workshop, I'm going to integrate our COIL experience that we've been doing for the past 5 years, which is collaborative online international learning experience with the Netherlands, the Hague University of Applied Sciences. So we'll give you some actual look at assignments and ways to kind of integrate these things as we go along about how to apply them and implement them if you're interested in kind of doing your own COIL design and what that may look like as well. So I did kind of want to just open it up really quickly too, for those of you who are in the session and see kind of what your interests are in today's session. So I kind of wanted to see if anyone was interested in doing a COIL on campus, or if there was any desire to just kind of learning a little bit more about how to kind of globally connect the classroom, or if you're just interested in the topic. I just wanted to see if anyone was actually interested in doing a COIL experience. I don't know, Lisa, if that's something you had been thinking about, or if you're just interested in the content.
Yeah, no, I actually, the last time I did a COIL was in, I think it was spring of 2014.
Oh, wow.
And it was really heavily micromanaged at that time. And so I'm just actually looking to see like how it's working now. And so, you know, when I did it, it was okay. It could have gone a lot better, but we also only did it once. And I know this works better when you do it over a long period of time. So I'm open to doing it again, in short. I just want to see what the process is like now, because it's been like almost 10 years.
Yeah, definitely, which I think probably now would be a completely different experience for you. So yeah, we can get into that, because from my experience, it's been completely moldable to what myself and Minjung, as well as our other co-instructors, have really wanted to do. And Josh McCoon has been really supportive of, you know, what we've been doing too. So that's been a really great experience in that regard. And then Liz, I wanted to see kind of what you're interested in. I know you've been doing a lot with study abroad too. So.
Yeah, so doing the faculty-led study abroad has been interesting. And, you know, I just like Lisa said, the more I'm going to do it, the better it'll get too. But so I don't know, I wanted to see what the options were for COIL, because I kind of want to integrate my research more in with the abroad experience. So I thought that maybe this would be a good opportunity or a good way to do that.
Yeah, excellent. Great, both great ways to integrate this. Great ideas. Awesome. So a little bit what I'm going to talk about is kind of what is COIL, kind of the impact of COIL, some of those frameworks, which really are just kind of stepping stones of ideas of how to kind of set the course up, and a newer framework, which has been really beneficial for Minjung and I as to how we set our course up. And again, every year, because we sustained this for 5 years now, so we refine year after year, and we've had the past couple of years a turnover in different instructor for the past couple of years, which has been a little bit difficult, but it's still maintained and been really, really fun to do and really great for the students. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then the components of how we created it, along with what like SUNY Central has, you know, talked about, and then some examples of our COIL assignments and also some student examples that they gave me permission to share today. So you can kind of see what the actual outcomes are and what the students really do produce, because this COIL component is part of one of our core courses as well. So it's one of our upper division level courses in HPW, and we added the COIL component into it. So there's a lot of work already in this course, and then we add this COIL component. So the work is still pretty high quality, I think, in regards to what they're doing. So I wanted to kind of show actually what those examples look like for you. So overall, in regards to what we're talking about today, in regards to like globally connected classrooms, the term COIL, it really is a pedagogy. When we get down to it, it really is creating an environment that helps foster this intercultural connection, but really competence levels. And also really the self-efficacy of students. I've noticed in the 5 years that I've done it, the confidence levels of students believing and understanding that, yes, I do have cultural awareness and learning those skills has definitely increased. And also using technology to connect to geographical areas within the classroom. And ultimately designing these courses with international aspects to help, interact students and have them, really interact in a way where maybe they aren't able to do it because of financial burden for study abroad. They're able to sign up for the course like they would normally here at SUNY Oswego and get this, interactive experience and still get kind of the global competency like they would with a study abroad, and not have to actually, go and travel and have that economic burden if they're unable to do it. So we have had that reaction from a lot of students that, wow, I was never able to study abroad and I'm able to do it with a COIL. So we have had that great experience from students in feedback from the COIL. So technology and cost effectiveness, similarly building off of that, one thing that's been really beneficial for us in this process is we've had everything that we needed technologically here on our campus. Nothing that the students needed outside of what they already had or what our classrooms already had or what my online course already had. So existing hardware, software, already both our campus, their campus had. Really what happened was the first couple of years that we did our COIL design, we were using Blackboard. They had a completely different type of learning management system, but our instructional designers were able to input those students into a Blackboard shell for us. This year was great. We had Brightspace, they had Brightspace, and I'll be sharing my shell so you guys can see that. Kathy Dutton was able to put all their students in there with our students, and then they're able to submit their assignments and everything was great. So those are kind of the cool things depending on what institution geographically you're working with. Our instructional designers are able to take the emails of those students wherever they're located, that instructor, and put them into our learning management system. That's been done for us, whether they have a completely different one or not, it's been done for us that way. And when we had the same one, like Brightspace this year, they were able to do it too. So we do have that capability on our campus. So if you're worried about technology, that can be done. Thank you to them. They're very helpful in that, but you do want to give them time. If you are thinking about doing that, reaching out, and Kathy is able to do that with Brightspace. She's been very helpful with that. So students don't need to make a huge commitment when you're thinking about COIL. What they do want to think about is, yes, in regards to signing up for a course that also has this embedded, maybe, they want to think about the time, that type of thing. But in regards to financially or in terms compared to study abroad, it's going to be different, right? And it's actually going to be something that will help them. It's more cost effective for them in that sense. But instead it's taken right here at their current institution using the technology that they have, communication, collaboration, which adds no extra or additional cost to students, which again, really thinking about COIL, for me, I started prior to the pandemic, and it was the semester that the pandemic hit that I was doing COIL. So I really experienced the benefits of it, being able to have the students globally collaborate during a pandemic. The students were able to have conversations with our Dutch students who were going through the same type of pandemic, and they were getting different insights and inputs. And it was really great to see, their experiences. And it was a really great dynamic that was happening during that time. So some of the impacts of COIL. So prior research has shown that with COIL courses, learners who participate actually have better conceptual understanding, intercultural communication, greater persistence, increased engagement, superior class attendance, more effective problem-solving skills compared to counterparts because of kind of the class dynamic, the engagement, critical thinking, and the global experience that they're getting. So we do see that COIL does have impacts and benefits for students, different than just kind of a normal class experience, the way it's outlined, the way that they have this collaborative engagement, the friendship building as well. We've seen that be really successful. I've actually had one of my students in the past 5 years, it may not seem like a lot, but to have one student that is a US student travel to Holland to meet their partner is pretty huge, right? Just based off of the course. So I think these types of impacts are really important, and it's really been beneficial. I think another thing that's really important to think about if you are interested in wanting to do a COIL is, in our field of health promotion and wellness, I think about this all the time regarding the pandemic again, but the world of our field has changed, right? It's ever evolving. And I say to my students all the time, you may never meet your colleagues. You may get a job that's completely virtual and remote, telehealth, telemedicine, and you may have colleagues that are international, global, and you may never meet them. So having the skills technologically, having the cultural competence to be able to, meet virtually and have these meetings is a skill set that's extremely important for our students, and building those skill sets that are part of their areas of responsibility as a health educator that are imperative for our field. So this type of experience is just part of what those skills need to be for our students. And I think it helps them when it comes to getting careers as well, and kind of just that professionalism that they need with employers moving forward. So the COIL research model. So this is one of the newer ones that's been developed in 2020. And I really like this one. It's a little bit easier to kind of follow than some of the older ones. It is the COIL research model that we used for our project more recently. And it starts off simply by saying, okay, if you're going to do a COIL experience, if you're going to do a COIL course, the first thing to do is develop a COIL partnership. What other institution and professor you're going to work with, which is pretty much, I think, the hardest part, which I'll get to in a second about how to start that. And then from there, you're aligning course projects and outcomes with that instructor. You're really kind of having a consistent meetings, conversations virtually with that instructor about how you're going to create the course, what type of learning objectives, intercultural, global competencies you're infusing into those learning outcomes, and you're assigning projects. It's a complete collaboration with that other instructor from the other institution. And from that point forward, you're continuing on, how are we going to review student progress? What type of feedback are we looking at? And are we going to administer surveys to gauge pre and post test data? Are we looking at qualitative feedback, quantitative feedback? How are we going to do this process? Essentially going through all the steps of creating the course design and from start to finish. And then lastly, analyzing the data. Essentially, am I going to publish this? Is it going to be a manuscript? Are we going to present conference? Or are we just using it to refine, with the next process forward? Minjung and I, as well as Josh, have published I think about 4 to 5 different conferences and also manuscripts regarding COIL in our experience, because we have been doing it so long term and kind of doing different things. We recently just submitted another one of strictly qualitative findings from this past spring. So there's a lot of great research that you can do with your COIL experience and the global competencies and skill sets that you see with your students. So it's another way to kind of build your own, professional development and research area and agenda as well. But I really like this model because it kind of outlines the process in a more simpler dynamic than SUNY Central's, but SUNY Central's is pretty good as well. This is SUNY Central's. They talk about course A, course X, the 2 different courses. There's credit given in both classes. You have institution B, institution Y, 2 different languages often, and it could be the same or different discipline. In our scenario, we had the same discipline. One was applied sciences. They were more nutrition and dietetics, which still is aligned with our field of health promotion and wellness. But you'll see here the professors collaborate first with the planning and design, and then the students collaborate with their discussions and their progress. So you're seeing both courses are just essentially collaborating through the entire semester, or however long. Maybe it's just a 6-week collaboration, or maybe it's the entire course that you're doing together. It just depends on how you and the other instructor want to design it. And you really do have complete freedom of how you want to do that. In my experience for the past 5 years here. So those collaborations are really, partnering with that different professor, and how do you want to enrich the course, and how do you want to work together to design it, implement it, and collaborate based on how you want to customize it and what needs do you want met by your students. So what are you looking to do in your course? What competencies or global competencies and skill sets are you wanting to kind of infuse? And I've seen courses, art and design do COIL experiences, everything from, we have someone in mathematics here on our campus doing a COIL course. So it can be in any type of discipline. And it's really cool to see what students get out of these experiences. So there is some important questions to ask yourself before you even start to look for a partner in the process, which is really, what qualities make your course a good candidate for COIL, which really is having yourself sit down and reflect on, what is it that I really want the students to get out of this experience? What is it about the curriculum that I really want to engage with intercultural competencies or globalization, those types of things? What is it about the readiness to, or what, thinking about your own readiness with technology? Do you feel like you are in a place where you're good to go with technology to teach in an enhanced way? That's one thing I will say is, we do a design where we have both the institutions meet for like all class meetings. So there is technology in the classroom, and also I teach an asynchronous course that does COIL, and we're collaborating with the face-to-face course. So there is some technology that we have to know how to work to do that. And also the students, if there's questions about technology, time differences, there is a responsibility on, myself as well as Minjung to understand how to work this and make sure our students understand it. So there was like a little bit of professional development in some areas of making sure that we understand how this is going to work for us, and if we have the technology to do it, which worked out great. Like I said, our campus does have the capability to get students into a shell for you. So we are pretty good there with the technology aspect. So that should be good for everybody. The other thing about availability of institutional support, we didn't really need any other funding per se for us in regards to the COIL. I know that in the past, we've seen a lot come through SIG. We've funded some SIG innovation, the curriculum innovation grants. We've had some come through where we funded for some COIL experiences actually. So if you are interested, if it's something a little bit different outside of what your normal responsibilities are, we funded some that way. I found, and Minjung's found, that we haven't actually needed any additional funding to do this. It's just something we've embedded into, what we normally do with our courses. So I think in regards to any additional institutional support, we haven't really needed it, other than just the technology aspect of our instructional designers helping us get, the students and the instructors into the course for us. So creating that partnership. So kind of starting off with that research model and that first step. So the most critical and challenging piece, and a lot of people have asked me before, well, how did you find that person? How did this process start? What did that look like? How do I reach out to somebody? It's really start by looking into your professional network. And if there isn't a professional network of anyone internationally, it's conferences. So that happened organically for us. I wasn't actually even at this conference. My colleague Minjung was at a conference, and she was at a session with somebody, and they got to talking, and in a similar field. She was from the Netherlands, and that's how it happened. They exchanged information, and from there, a COIL partnership was made. So if you are someone that goes to conferences, or Liz, like you said, traveling to doing the study abroad with Australia and the CAP institution, there's most definitely probably some connections there with other instructors. And those are the ways to really kind of reach out to people and get those kind of connections going. And really what you're doing is you're looking for a faculty member in a different geographical region that has, the diversity that you're looking for, that helps or teaches within a class that's kind of acceptable for your own class. It could be a completely different discipline. We went with something that was similar to our own because it just made sense with how we were running our course, and possibly looking at your overlapping goals. We had 2 professors that had the same mutual interests, mutual goals, mutual kind of course structure. So it worked out really well for us, and it just kind of happened like that organically. Another aspect is really from there, once you create that partnership, they call it discuss the prospect of coiling, right? So then identifying, okay, let's meet and discuss this a little bit more about what the next steps are, which is really how would we do this? What would this look like? How do we start the process? So we really used this progression of a COIL model, which was really starting with a team building phase, which was really introductions and icebreakers. So the way that we set up our kind of COIL experience, like I said, it was embedded in our 448 program planning course, which is the first of our upper division core course in the HPW major. And what we did was we had a virtual all class meeting session, and the students were able to meet all the instructors and also the students. And we did icebreaker sessions, we did introductions, and it was like a full class day of meeting, and it was a virtual interaction. And this is designed to really help get to know and feel comfortable working with everyone online and across cultures. So really how they say to kind of start the process or design the first set of kind of activities and experiences is just like you would in your first, session of classes, right? Is really do the introductions and your icebreakers. So that's really how we kind of started to design what we would do with our COIL. From there, you're looking at how are we then going to design assignments, pairing students up? What does this look like? What do the projects look like? So for us, I'll get a little bit deeper as I go through, but just for the general overview here, I'll go through the steps. But we then made sure that each student was paired up prior, and they knew just by looking at the general sheet, the name of the person and who they were going to be paired with virtually. When we did our introductions and icebreakers virtually, they met that person, they were able to chat in breakout rooms and get to know them and do their icebreaker sessions. But then when it came to the next assignment, it was then a one-on-one interaction that they had to meet at a different time, completely individual. And they had to engage in their first assignment, which was a comparative discussion. Which these comparative discussions, like I said, this is a really general statement here, prepare the student for effective collaborative project work. We created our own assignments. The first assignment they really had, we decided to do kind of another comparative discussion, but also still kind of team building. It was the first time they were meeting together. So it was about me kind of introduction and discussion. And yes, my class, Lisa, this is really interesting. My class was asynchronous. Minjung's was face-to-face, and the Netherlands course was face-to-face. But we all met virtually. But in the past, I've also had a face-to-face. Minjung's had a face-to-face. So I've done it in several different ways. And it works, in every way, really, however you want to design it. Because at the end of the day, everything took place virtually, whether the students were in the classroom or my students were online, everyone was on Zoom, so it worked out. The only difference was some of the virtual sessions, Minjung had her students just in the classroom and the camera just there for all of them there, versus my students individually in the boxes on Zoom, but everyone was still there. Yeah. So then the collaboration, one of the next ones, students apply knowledge, create something together, have substantive discussions around the topic or collaboration. This is where we started to design more of an assignment that collaborated with what our courses were. So these collaborative assignments were about planning a health program. And both of the courses that the Dutch students were in and our students here at SUNY Oswego were in, the course was program planning. So both of them were doing similar things, and they were sharing how they were planning a program about nutrition and physical activity. So in doing so, they had to share photos, videos of their target populations from the different country, different dietary recommendations, government initiatives from the different country, to have discussions about how globally health is different in different areas, and really talk about similarities and differences. And they really kind of had to read research and kind of have discussions about the differences in the different countries and the similarities. And there was some collaborative discussions there in those assignments. And then lastly, there's a presentation of final work, which I'll show you in our final project, which I dig a little bit deeper in, is kind of a cumulative each one of the assignments the students worked on in their virtual one-on-one video meetings established a final video presentation. So they created PowerPoint slides as their assignment for each one. So they were collaborating along the way every time they met up one-on-one and created like 1 to 2 slides that then they finally kind of created a, final video with their partner. But essentially they say these are kind of the effective COIL, phases for it to be a great start. So these are some things when you're thinking about what are the steps, in creating it. Is the syllabus, those objectives, what's the expectations of workload for the students, not only for the students, but also for you as the faculty. What are you guys expecting of the students? Is it going to be a full course, or is it just an actual project that you're implementing in the class? How are you going to do the student teams and formations? Project types, the assessment tools, your expectations, those types of things. And each year we've changed the topic of the project. It's been a different health issue each year. We've done mental health one year. We've done nutrition, physical activity was this year. We've done stress. Like there's just been a variety of different topics each year that they can choose from. And again, grade distributions. Are you going to use a joint learning management system? All of kind of the intricate elements of how you're going to create it logistically is something you would meet with that partner about prior to the course starting. So this is what our course syllabus looked like, but I'm going to show you a better example here. So this is our full kind of, and this is for, like I said, the students were enrolled in 448, which is our SUNY Oswego course. And then they had this, which we called the COIL project. So this was where we introduced the students, because it was a 6-week activity. We called it a COIL project. So the course they're enrolled in 448 was already started. And then this was like one aspect of the course. So it started a little bit later in the semester. So they already had their 448, syllabus and everything. And this was an additional little project syllabus about the COIL opportunity. And you'll see here, we introduced it and talked a little bit about the assignments, who the instructors were, and really about what we wanted them to get out of it. We wanted them to meet someone from another country, share diverse views and perspectives on country resources about programming, behavior change interventions, and really how to analyze how health educators from each country navigate different tools and skills to develop health promotion activities geared towards healthy lifestyle, quality of life. So final project and assignment goals, we gave a little bit of an overview, and then we talked a little bit about what those overall learning objectives were for the collaboration. So for us, we landed on facilitating an understanding and appreciation of cultural differences between the US and Holland, learning about lifestyle health promotion, building intercultural communication, acquiring digital and communication skills, connecting with students, and just developing cultural sensitivity. We kept them really basic because they already have other learning objectives built into their courses at each institution. We wanted them to just get out of the experience some global competencies, learning a little bit more about digital communication skills, and build more cultural sensitivity and awareness. And you'll notice here, the first step was the virtual joint class meeting. So this is where we all met together. And we, as the instructors, facilitated this part where we introduced all the classes. So there was 3 classes that were in the virtual meeting, and we introduced the overview of the COIL experience, the breakdown of the assignments and the rubrics and what they were expected to do, what the rationale behind the experience was. And we also explained the pre and post test survey and why we were doing a survey to kind of gauge their knowledge from pre and post regarding their self-efficacy in global competence, but also, we wanted to see what they gained before and after from the experience, and also what their overall perspectives were at the end of the COIL and what could be changed, those types of things, any refinements. And then they were put in breakout rooms to meet their partner. And that's where they really met their partner for the first time. And we had Google Docs where they exchanged information. They wrote down their emails, how they wanted to actually meet for the first time and the date they were going to meet for the first time. So that was established so that the instructors could see that they already established the date. And it was very interesting. They were given freedom to choose whatever mode of technology they wanted for that first meeting. And I didn't know there's like video calling with Snapchat, and there's just so many incredible social media apps that I didn't know had these types of tools that the students used. So we had Facebook, we had Instagram lives, like students were doing just so many different things just to do virtual communication, and it wasn't just the Zoom. So it was interesting to see that a lot of the Dutch students, just Zoom wasn't really their main use, right? So a lot of our students use different pieces of technology that they use very differently, like Instagram or TikTok. Those types of things are used very differently for them. So they were able to use technology a little bit different, and they thought that was really neat too. And that was a way to discuss their communication methods in their first meeting date, because everything after that was on them to meet one-on-one virtually on their own and start to facilitate their own meetings regarding their assignments. And then we also had them engage in a Padlet, which was a little bit of an icebreaker. And this was kind of a cool, if it opens, to show where everybody was from. Because one thing that's interesting is in the past, a lot of the students from the Hague University of Applied Sciences are not like originally from the Netherlands, they're from all over. So we did like this little map, which shows where everyone's from. And if you like drag out, we'll have our US students here, and it shows where our students are. And the questions, if you click on, where a student is from, it basically tells you what their favorite food is and where they're from. Oops, if I can scroll down. I don't think it's letting me scroll down. But anyway, it was a little Padlet icebreaker. They had to post a photo of their food, where they're from. And it was a great way for the students to kind of introduce themselves, get to know each other prior to us doing our first virtual meeting, and just a neat little way to see on the map where everybody was, and kind of again see kind of the geographical location and kind of how far away we all were, in that type of idea. One thing that was a little bit difficult for students was time difference, 6-hour difference. Biggest thing we always get in feedback. But also a positive that I've noticed more recently from the students, because of the fact that the students have to problem solve and critical think about how are we going to meet? Like, this is a huge time difference. Even when we were doing our virtual all class meeting, they're already done classes for the day. It's dinner time, past dinner time. And we had to kind of problem solve, critical think about what dates and times we're going to work best as faculty to meet those needs. We kind of used it as an advantage. We talked to the students and provided a rationale about there is a time difference. This is part of the skill set. And I kind of posed it to the students, really, this is also professional development. This is something employers are going to look for. You're going to probably have colleagues that you may never see, you may never meet, and there are going to be time differences. And it's something you have to be organized. You have to make sure that you're adapting and you're being flexible, because these meetings are part of the course. It's part of what you have to do. So it worked out. A lot of them got really creative about how they did it. That's why I think a lot of the Snapchat or different things worked in different ways for students, and they were able to do really well with that. So team building, so the pretest survey, the Padlet, and then their first virtual meeting one-on-one, they had the About Us partnered meeting, and this is where they were asked to do their first assignment, which was creating a few PowerPoint slides. Again, this is kind of like a scaffolding to create a one big final presentation. So each slide, was then created at the end was the final project. So the first couple were really background about who they were. So their name, where they're from, using photos. So they had to collaborate in their virtual meeting. They had to come to the meeting with the photos, talk about those photos, and create the PowerPoint together, create those slides together virtually. And interesting facts, what their hobbies were, and sharing what their current knowledge was of the other partner's country. Really interesting, because there were some outlandish things that students laughed about, especially from what a lot of the students from the Netherlands think about the US. So some of the students thought that was pretty interesting, what the thoughts were about our country. And they learned quite a lot. They thought there was a lot of really cool things that they didn't know about students in the Netherlands. And something that I learned the first year was that a lot of the students 15, 16 years old in what's considered college, right? In the Netherlands. So really interesting, different things. So they started to learn just different things about culture. And this was a great way for them to really just understand those different types of things. And then student example, like I said, was able to use their, was given permission to use theirs. So you'll see here, they show their photos, where they're from. So they really put effort in, and they really show who they are, and they really collaborated. So it was a really great experience, and we had a lot of different, this one was on mental health. So like I said, each year we have a different target. So sometimes the questions are a little bit different, but a lot of great information. Students put effort into it. So it's a really great experience. So again, Lisa, like you had mentioned, we're able to really cater those assignments how we really want it to collaborate with our courses. So it's worked really well for us. Then moving into more of a comparative discussion, going off of kind of that module that I showed. This one was global dietary and physical activity needs assignment. So then we kind of, next step was they had to read some research articles. Each student had to read the opposite country. They read a government nutrition article and a government physical activity article. From there, they had to then explore nutrition, physical activity in the other country. They had to come with questions for their partner and ready to collaborate. They then created 3 additional PowerPoint slides that built off their About Me slides based on the instructions below. So they had to kind of discuss, predisposing, reinforcing factors, which is part of our discipline, but also really looking at similarities, comparisons, and differences about the dietary and physical guidelines in each country, because they were different. And it was really interesting to see students' reactions about, how, as health educators, the differences in the different countries. If our students were to go somewhere else, understanding the differences and what those guidelines are as to what they would need to do as a health educator. So then collaborative discussions, culture and environment. So this one is where students had to actually bring videos, interviews, and photos, where they're really talking about this overall project of planning, an intervention for their community. And the photos, videos, interviews is about their target population, their discussion here about how it relates to physical activity. They shared photos, and they then were adding slides again to that final presentation that they would do at the end. So again, it was like scaffolding and just adding to this one big thing that they would then present at the end. So that was one of the collaboration ones. This was really great because students, again, they can't travel and study abroad, right? But they are in the class and they're actually seeing video, photos, or interviews from the other country. So it's a great way to still have those experiences. So then lastly, the presentation of work, really from that module, they say this is kind of the last cumulative piece. And this one, we did the final video project. Like I said, it was the final, adding the slides to the final piece, and then the students actually had to present it. And they had to use all of those photographs, narratives. They either had to do it in iMovie, VoiceThread, or Zoom, and each of the students had to be there in real time presenting it. And again, all of those slides from the past content is there, and they go over that information and they're walking through all of it. And it is a final video in that process. And this one was a little bit longer. This one was like 22 minutes, but they really get into all their assignments, as you'll see here, and they're talking through all of their content, their information, their reflections, their photos, their videos. So it really is a lot of
the next picture,
a lot of effort, a lot of reflection, a lot of collaboration between the students, and reflection about, you know, their global competencies, but also what they've learned about the field and how it's different in different cultures with different similarities, and building those friendships. And again, using the different types of technology, having to use video and those types of things. What we did do in the past, the year before, so last year, we did a photo voice project, which was, instead of a final video, it was photo narratives, which was more reflective journaling about meaningful pieces of photos, about mental health that impacted the students personally. So that photo voice project was a little bit different than the video. So each year we try and do a final kind of project assignment that is kind of impactful for the students. So it's not always something that's like a final video project or something like that. It's either a photo voice, or we come up with something new each year. So it's different for the students. We get new students each year that do it, but we did, Tawny, who we've worked with in the past, said there could be the potential that we get a student that takes the class again on her end, and we didn't want to risk the potential that, you know, the student will be doing the same exact thing again, even though they'd have a different partner. But those are the assignments that we did this year. So those are some of them. One other thing that we added this year was another assignment, which was a final student reflection. And this was essentially so we could kind of get some more qualitative information from the students regarding their cultural perspectives regarding the field and health education. So we looked at how the COIL experience and project helped the students learn about lifestyle and health promotion from a new cultural perspective. What tools do they recognize were essential as a health educator working with different populations? So this was kind of a discussion that was put in the Brightspace learning management system. And then also looking at what other, looking at their cultural sensitivity, cultural awareness, and how that has impacted them in the skills that they found important that help them attain those skills. And they posted that. So this was an additional final assignment that came after the final video project. So then the post-test survey, once they do the pre-test, they also do the post-test. So some of those questions are, what did you enjoy about COIL, your least favorite? So those are some of those kind of basic feedback about the COIL experience. But then we also use just the general pre and post-test survey is the PISA Global Learning Experience, the Program for International Student Assessment, but also the Global Learning Experience GLE questionnaire. And we have questions here that look a little bit about their competencies, dealing with different cultures, different situations, overcoming difficulties, interacting with people. So looking at their self-efficacy from the PISA International Assessment Tool. So we use that one. The International Student Assessment, we've used kind of the global competency assessment here from them to kind of measure their capacity to examine intercultural issues. We've adapted that one as the pre and post questionnaire. And we've liked that one for the most part, worked pretty well, but we've been able to adapt and create our own or use our own, I should say, questionnaire in the process too. So that's something you probably would be able to do too, depending on what you would like to use in the process. Some of the data, this is some of our older data, but just from Oswego and the Hague University. So the COIL component of this course introduced me to a new outlook and new ways of thinking about how I relate to the world. So, you know, strongly agree. We did have high percentage of students agree. Same with that was our Oswego students and also our Hague students agreeing that they felt like the COIL component of the course helped them in new ways and new outlook to the world, introducing them to it's the same question here from the next year there, similar. So we did get, you know, some good qualitative, quantitative data as well. So overall, it's been pretty successful for us in the outcome and pretty moldable to what we've done, you know, in our assignments and how we've kind of implemented it into our courses. So that's it. Any questions, Lisa?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just my only question is, so is the SUNY COIL Center, well, two questions. One, is it still in existence? And two, did you have to run everything by you and go by their checklist of how to organize everything, or?
Great question. So from my understanding, it's still there. I mean, the website's still there and everything, but I think when the pandemic happened, a lot of that, there's been a lot of unknowns with that from what I've heard from Josh. He probably can speak to that a little bit more. When we started doing the COIL, and Minjung is really the spearhead in it, and she kind of pulled me in later because she was the one who's been doing it for the total 5 years, and I kind of hopped on a few years later. She kind of met with Josh and he knew about it and he's kind of helped facilitate with her in that process. So my understanding is they probably, I don't know if they needed to do a specific checklist with them at that time. Ever since I've been on board, we haven't had to do anything specifically with them. We've kind of had the freedom from my understanding with Josh and how we've been doing it here. But I'm trying to think.
Yeah, no, you would know. You would have known.
Yeah. I'm blanking.
Okay, that's good to know.
I'm blanking on his name right now. IGE. Ulysses. He will email and ask if anybody's doing COIL stuff. He had in the past, and I would email and say, yes, Minjung and I were doing it. I don't know if that was for anything particular.
It was probably for the IGE report.
Okay, yeah. So, but yeah, there hasn't really been much from what I've heard from Josh really with the COIL stuff either.
Okay.
Kind of just been, because there used to be funding and the conference and like a lot of that. I think the conference still happens and stuff, but I'm not sure. Yeah. So we kind of just do it in our way, and it worked, and it's been well received. So
yeah, no, that's good.
Yeah. Which, and it seems like probably less of a headache, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how it was at the beginning. And then, like before, I think the COIL Center was even a place, and then it became like really administrative. Like, and that the class that I taught went okay, not so much because of that, but just also because of we'd like agreed on assignments and then the other professor like kind of changed them partway through. But
Yeah.
it was, yeah, I mean, it was fine. So, okay. Yeah, that's useful to see, having seen your examples.
Yeah. And what's really worked for us too is the fact that the course at The Hague is, it's actually a COIL course. So embedded in their curriculum is that the students have to take a COIL course. So they're enrolled in this course knowing it's a COIL course, and they have to take a COIL course. So that works well for us. So that they know that this is part of their experience and they have to do it. And they have to take so many. It's not just one. It's like they have to take several. So their curriculum, it's infused throughout, you know, their entire degree. So it's really interesting. So it works well for us. And it was just a really organic thing that, you know, Minjung had met Tawny and they just exchanged information and it just kind of happened like that. But
Yeah, that's awesome.
Minjung also has connections in Korea too, and we're going to actually do another one moving forward with her colleague that she knows at, I think it's the University of Seoul, I think. So that may be happening too. But it's worked really well. I mean, it's been happening for 5 years and there's been some turnover. Tawny took a new position. So then she introduced us to someone else and then that person got another position recently. So introduced us to someone that I had worked with previously. And there's been a little bit of turnover, which made it a little bit difficult the past couple of years, but for the most part, it's been okay. But there's always those bumps in the road where some students don't respond and
Right, yeah.
stuff like that, but we've been pretty good about reaching out and getting everybody on track. I think overall, the benefits to the students, we've heard a lot of good feedback from the students versus negative, so I think all that's been good, so,
Cool.
yeah.
All right, well, thank you for your
Great.
time.
Yes, thank you so much for coming.
I'll see
Have a
you.
good one. Thanks, bye.
Bye.